and just, I don't know where you were in your life, where the Apollo was in its life. Like, it was just two worlds met, and you just had a great ass set and just ripped it at the Apollo.
It was, it was, I think it was my third time there. I was a little comfortable. The first two times I was shitting my pants like that. I'm gonna bomb. The first time was my first TV, set ever. And I was like, everybody was getting booed off, and that's how I got on. They're like, you want to go on? All the acts, Steve Harvey got booed off. He comes back, his toupee's all tilted, he's sweating,
My little one hitter. Where you at with your herb content these days? Like, everybody kind of fluctuates, and as we grow older, it all changes and gets legal. So with this podcast, I like just to hearing about, just like people's morning routine, where are you at with your relationship with cannabis?
I am gung-ho 1,000,000%. And my favorite thing about New York, I was saying New York is like Amsterdam and Paris had a baby, because the whole entire city smells like weed. There's bikes all over the place. You're about to get hit by a bike when you step in the street. Everyone's out eating in the streets. I loved it.
Cannabis coffee hour. Now, what's your opinion, Creeper? I know you're a fitness guru, and it's some mental. What is your morning routine like?
I definitely drink coffee, homie.
Mm-hmm.
I hit a little. I'm not like back in the day, because I just turned 40, homie, on Saturday,
Dude, congratulations. That's a blessing.
Yeah, thank you, homie. I appreciate it. But like back in the day, homie, in my 20s, definitely I would wake up and, I would do a bong toke or whatever.
Yeah.
And to be like, all right, because this is just how the day goes. Like, hit the bong toke, whatever. Now,
this is just a far side. Yeah, get the day.
Yeah, stuff like that. Underground, socially conscious, elevated conscious, hip hop, all that stuff.
But at the end of the day, California's always been ahead of the game when it comes to herb. And it just has. I don't care. I mean, Colorado, when it got legalized, it sprung up. And I used to get weed in Colorado. My friends lived in Aspen right after college, and I visited them a couple times, and I got amazing weed. But it wasn't the same as when I went to San Francisco. It's just the culture, Like all those bands and musicians and the Fillmore and Golden Gate Park, like hippies been smoking weed like there since the beatniks, since the 1950s, American culture in terms of cannabis all kind of stems. I mean, it really, I can't say it started there, but it definitely took root.
Yeah, well, that's, the Bay Area is where I got indoctrinated, got into cannabis, because all my Bay Area comedy friends, I'd come up from LA and visit them, and they were pretty much all of them were into weed, so it was pretty prevalent. And then that's really how I got into it. I was a late bloomer.
Yeah,
I didn't really get into weed till my late 20s.
Well, I don't know if we could even talk about it, but the idea of basically it's like two dudes inherit a weed farm. Like it is that's the essential log line. But I love now all of the Murder Mountain shit where you can also play with the holdouts, right? Because now Humboldt is a whole world of people that refuse to go legit because they like the outlaw lifestyle.
Yes. Did you watch Murder Mountain? I talked about it on this podcast, dude.
Yeah, dude.
I went deep. Everybody was yelling Tiger King, and I was like, yo, the ZZ Top documentary is ill.
I love the ZZ Top documentary because the ZZ Top documentary made me realize they were kind of weird art outlier nerds.
Yes.
Where they came up with the packaging thing. They came up with a vibe, which then I learned about that with the Ramones, they were also like that. I didn't know that too. We went in Berlin, I went to the Ramones Museum. I didn't know a heck of a lot about them, but knowing that they were composed, not composed, they used to fight and shit on stage, but the vibe was set and the costumes were set. And
I know what you're saying. I'm just
they have a perspective.
Yeah. They a lot of these early punk bands, and
they had an art thing going on. They had a uniform, and they kind of were characters, and that cut through the noise of everybody else, because everybody else was just trying to be cool, And then these guys like ZZ Top, essentially, I'm to equate the two, like they cut through because they're like nerd cred allowed them to do it, because they realized like, hey, why don't we just trust the things that we like and what the thing that sounds right to us? And yes, it's going to lead to a 50 no's, but the one yes that comes opens a huge door, because then you're the only one offering that product. You're the only one doing music that way.
Great book, and I read this book. Even when I was in Seattle, I read your book like in 48 hours. He has a great book that he cranked out about his life and about like, yeah, you signed a record deal when fucking record deals were record deals. Like,
yeah.
And not when record deals were record deals. It was like record deals on steroids. Like the music industry was just throwing around crazy cocaine oil money everywhere. It couldn't get hotter than the 80s. And you were right snap dab in the middle of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and the Beastie Boys. You were right in there. And in terms of culture, it was just a huge, I don't think people realize like the wave of culture that it just pushed through. And yeah, you're lucky to be alive, Mike. I'm looking at you. How old were you when you signed your record deal?
23. Yep. And while we were making the first album, we made it in Los Angeles. I guess April, while we were making it is when the OJ Bronco drive happened. Oh, and actually I got to LA on the day Kurt Cobain died.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I went to stay at this friend of mine's house that had no TV, no heat, and it was me and my girlfriend. And so I land, and she's like, I think something happened to Kurt Cobain. I'm like, I think that was like a month ago, right, in Italy? And so we didn't know for like 3 days. We hung out in this house for 3 days, and then, came out and found that the world had changed. But here's the thing is, Soul Golfing didn't really make any money, but we got a lot of shit paid for. Like a lot of hotel rooms paid for, a lot of buses,
I know the gig, man.
Yeah. And it was all because of Nirvana. It was all because when Nirvana happened, nobody in the music business had any idea what it was about. And they were just like signing bands if they didn't understand it. I mean, like the Melvins were on Atlantic, man. I mean, come on. The fucking Boredoms were on Reprise. Yeah.
Wow.
Like they were just like, we don't get this. Let's give them money. Like, let's get them before anybody else does. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the rise of the alt world. It was the rise of all those dirty record stores that we all went to go get fucking Nothing Matters. The first Louder Than Love album, I got that first. Like, I was early into Soundgarden. Like, it was just this wave of kind of just different than cheese rock that's been going on underneath it all forever, that wasn't really recognized by the mainstream. And then all of a sudden, you guys were the mainstream. And yeah, you're buying long limos with jacuzzis and shit like that to go do an album.
We had no limos. Took a lot of car services though.
Yeah.
Took a lot of like very long car service rides, up to Washington Heights and shit. Because
I'm getting deep into meditations and stuff. And once you start naming things, they say the suffering happens. And I think a lot of that is once you start putting things into a box and start separating things, it's categorizing. It's not the best sometimes.
It kind of kills it too. I mean, once you give it a name, it becomes static, and the thing kind of becomes a thing of the past that people try to emulate. For example, I think when Nirvana was doing, Bleach, or maybe writing their second album, they were thinking, we're a grunge band. They never thought about it that way. And I don't think bands that like us sometimes get called stoner rock, we never thought of it that way. And usually the one hallmark that you're not a stoner rock band is that if you call yourself a stoner rock band.
Yeah.
It's well, what are you doing? Are you trying to just make music that comes from the heart, or are you trying to emulate something that goes along with a fashion and a brand and all this and that? And usually those things kind of arrive DOA.
Man.
Yeah, everybody loves him. All as far as like maybe different guys to people who Aren't drummers. All right. Steve Jordan. Huge. First time I heard him was on the first Blues Brothers album, Briefcase Full of Blues. Then I got the Made in America one. And then all of a sudden he was the late night drummer on Letterman. And then he was with Expensive Winos with Keith Richards.
Yeah.
And by then I started playing drums. He was on the cover of Modern Drummer. And I have just followed his career. That great documentary that Keith did when he put together the band with Chuck Berry.
Yes, with Keith Richards, that one, Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, like that movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's just incredible. And then, they have the big argument in there. And I just remember Steve, like, there's a point where Keith wasn't playing something right. And so the band would kind of drop out as Chuck and Keith were getting into it. Every time they dropped out, like, you get to hear Steve Jordan's groove without all the other instruments just for like a half a second. And just how incredible it was. I've always
like
been
that
into
Muscle Shoals, like groove.
I didn't remember, but yeah, that like one clip played.
You were like, everybody in show business is high. He was so funny. He goes, you go, look at the cameraman, he's high, and the whole crew started laughing. And I was standing at the side, and I was like, oh, this motherfucker just stole the scene. This kid is no joke, man. And then tell me about working on the Judd Apatow movie, as I light this spliff up, man.
Dude, he's the man, bro. He just makes the environment so awesome that you can be so creative.
Turnstiles manager
Nirvana.
is one of my close friends that I like grew up with doing hardcore and shit. He was actually like kind of like one of my little brothers in the hardcore scene, and now he is Turnstiles manager. He's one of the biggest like movers and shakers in hardcore. He like runs everything now. And he's sang in a band called
right now. He's
sang in a band called Backtrack. If any of your listeners like hardcore, check out this band called Backtrack. It's like real New York hardcore. They have a ton of records. They're hard as shit. So those guys were like the younger dudes in the scene when I was coming up, and then like I got old. I turned fucking 23 and aged out, old man. And they took over and really did their thing. Like my bands, we kind of had probably potential to blow up, but we were too fat and we were just busy eating sandwiches and fucking hanging out in Long Island to really to really push. But we did like a couple tours and shit and had our stuff. But
a 20 spot, and I got 3 like this will. I mean, only here for 3 days. Like this amount of weed should pretty much cover me because I had one of these before. I got a fresh one out, but I could only take like 4 or 5, until it like.